In relation to the SEO SPWS, the chamber heard evidence that Arkan and his men came to Erdut in late September or early October 1991. One witness testified about the arrest of the witness's family members and neighbors on the 9th of November 1991 by Serb soldiers dressed in 3 types of uniforms: those of the JNA, the Krajina police, and Arkan's men. The witness was later informed that the arrested persons were in Arkan's hands. The witness did not see the arrested persons again. In the following month, a member of the witness's family was badly beaten on 2 occasions by a man in camouflage uniform. In addition, soldiers looted the family home and painted the Serbian Cyrillic symbols on its inner walls. After the disappearance of the same family member, the witness became very afraid and decided to leave Erdut. As the witness was preparing to leave, a Serb neighbor offered to assist the witness on condition the witness signed a paper to the effect that the witness was leaving all the family's property to him and his wife. The witness had no choice but to sign the paper, as there was no one else to provide assistance. The witness left Erdut and the Serb-controlled area. Witness Stana Albert stated that she lived with her 98-year-old mother in the village of Erdut when Serb forces entered the village on the 1st of August 1991. On the 9th of April 1992, the witness, her mother, and other villagers were expelled from Erdut by Serb forces. On that day, a man in civilian clothes and another man, who was armed and in uniform, entered the witness's house. The man in civilian clothes put a knife to the witness's throat and a gun to her head, while the one in uniform ransacked the room and found the witness's savings. The witness and her mother were forced outside and put onto a bus. The witness recognized the bus driver as a Serb named Jovan Teodorović. There was one armed soldier and about 30 other villagers on the bus. The bus traveled to Savaš in Osijek municipality near the Serb and Croat separation line. It was dark when the villagers were told to get off the bus and walk towards the Croat soldiers. At that time, shelling started. As part of the road was mined, the villagers had to walk in the ditch next to the road. One elderly woman fell down and could not walk anymore. The witness heard that her body was found the next day. Croat soldiers came to help the villagers, and the witness finally made it to Osijek, where she stayed with relatives. In April 1998, the witness returned to her house in Erdut. Witness C1175 gave evidence that after the fall of Vukovar in November 1991, the JNA brought a large number of refugees to Dalj in buses and trucks. Women who were brought to Dalj were taken to the Red Cross building, where they were debriefed, registered, and transferred to the Dalj cinema for overnight accommodation. The next day, they were sent by buses to Serbia. Some men were also taken to the Dalj cinema, from where they were transported out of the region. Other men, however, were taken to the Territorial Defence Prison. In relation to Bosnia and Herzegovina, one witness gave evidence that after the fall of Zvornik in April 1992, the village of Gosluk was totally surrounded by Serb forces. Barricades were set up around the village by paramilitary groups and local Serbs. On the 26th of June 1992, a large number of tanks and other military vehicles arrived in Gosluk. The Muslim villagers were told to assemble in front of the cultural center and that they had to leave Gosluk within an hour. There were Serb soldiers in front of every house, and the witness estimated there were 3,000 soldiers in the village from the army, paramilitary units, the territorial defense, and local police. The soldiers were shooting in the air and shouting at the Muslim villagers, and they set fire to houses and stables. They pushed the villagers towards the center of the village, and some villagers were wounded. At the cultural center, the villagers were forced to sign statements that they were giving up their property. The villagers then boarded numerous buses and trucks which traveled in convoy to Loznica in Serbia, escorted by police and military vehicles. The witness testified that over 1,800 persons were expelled from Gosluk and the neighboring village of Skocic. From Loznica, the convoy continued to Ruma in Serbia, where the Muslims boarded a train and were transported to a refugee camp in Subotica. The Chamber considers that the evidence before it, including the above examples, addresses all of the elements of the crimes against humanity of deportation and inhumane acts consisting of forcible transfer. Again, the Chamber notes that the victims of the crimes described were predominantly of Croat, Bosnian Croat, Bosnian Muslim, and other non-Serb ethnic origin. The Chamber concludes that, at this stage, there is sufficient evidence of these crimes for counts 4 and 5 to stand. The Chamber will turn below to the question of whether there is sufficient evidence with respect to Simatovic's individual responsibility for the crimes of deportation and inhumane acts consisting of forcible transfer. The previously discussed crimes of murder, deportation, and forcible transfer also constitute the underlying acts of the crime of persecution alleged in count 1 of the indictment. The Chamber considers that there is sufficient evidence of all elements of the crime of persecution, including the requirement that the underlying acts be carried out on discriminatory grounds, for count 1 to stand. As a general remark, the Chamber emphasizes that it has given but a few examples of the evidence before it in relation to crimes committed in the territories of the SAO Krajina, the SAO SBWS, and Bosnia and Herzegovina from 1991 to 1995. The prosecution led sufficient evidence to indicate that units who were involved in the commission of the crimes charged included the Militia Krajina, police units commanded by Mila Matic, the Scorpions, Arkan's men, and the Red Berets. The Chamber will address the alleged link between these units and the accused later in this decision. Having found a sufficient evidentiary basis under the aforementioned Rule 98 bis standard of review of evidence, for the crimes charged in each and all counts of the indictment. The Chamber now turns to the responsibility of Simatović for these crimes. The Chamber will examine the evidence with regard to the mode of liability of participation in a joint criminal enterprise. As set out in the case law of the Tribunal, the elements of this mode of liability are a plurality of persons, a common objective which amounts to or involves the commission of a crime provided for in the statute, and the participation of the accused in the objective's implementation. The contribution of an accused need not have been substantial or necessary to the achievement of the common objective. However, it should at least be a significant contribution to the crimes forming part of the common objective. The mens rea required is that the participants in the JCE shared the intent to achieve the common objective through the commission of the statutory crime or crimes. This is what in the case law is referred to as the first form of JCE. And the prosecution has charged the accused with this mode of liability with regard to counts 1 through 5 of the indictment. In the alternative, in relation to the crimes of persecution and murder, the prosecution has also charged the accused with the third form of JCE. The mens rea required with respect to this charge is that the resulting crime or crimes were a natural and foreseeable consequence of the execution of the JCE, and that the accused was aware of this and participated with that awareness. The Chamber considers that there is sufficient evidence of a JCE between the accused and others named in the indictment. In relation to the first two elements of a JCE, the Chamber considered evidence of the alleged participants in the JCE agreeing upon and or discussing a common objective or otherwise manifesting its existence, which amounts to or involve the commission of the alleged crimes. The Chamber also examined the evidence relating to the commission of these crimes in the indictment areas during the relevant time periods. The Chamber then considered whether this evidence allows, on its own or together with other evidence, for an inference that the JCE existed. The Chamber received evidence, Exhibit P 940, that as of October 1991, alleged JCE member Karadzic openly discussed that the separation of Bosnia and Herzegovina from Serbia should be prevented through the, and I quote, through the extinction of the Bosnian Muslims, if need be. The prosecution also led evidence of a telephone conversation in January 1992 between Stanišić and Karadzic. This is Exhibit P 690. In it, Karadzic is reported to have said that the Croats and Serbs could, and I quote, resolve all their contentious issues in a month or two through, and I quote again, elasticity and goodwill. Alternatively, the Croats would be in, and I again quote, for 30 years of torture, with the blue helmets, with disagreements, with all sorts of things, end of quote. Stanišić then responded, and I quote again, with killings. And then Karadzic confirmed that. The Chamber received evidence of a prosecution insider witness who drew a map showing which areas in the SAO SWBS were to be brought under Serb control. Witness evidence relating to 1991 indicates that its underlying aim was, and I quote again, to link up Serb territories, and that this aim was to be achieved by driving out the Croat population from villages in the SAO Krajina and the SAO SBWS. See the evidence of JF 32 and JF 39. The Chamber received evidence of a meeting held on the 13th and the 14th of December 1993 in Belgrade, Exhibit P2532, which was attended by inter alia Slobodan Milosevic, Radovan Karadzic, Momcilo Perisic, Momcilo Krajisnik, Ratko Mladic, Radovan Stojic, also known as Badja, and the accused Stanišić. During this meeting, Karadzic discussed the strategic objective of being, and I quote again, separated from the Muslims and Croats, end of the quote, in areas in Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina, so that, and this is a quote again, that unification with Serbia would be possible in these areas. It appears that Stanišić presided over this meeting and gave comments on the deployment of units so that the aforementioned goal could be accomplished. On the 5th of July 1994, Stanišić sent a letter to members of the Ministry of the Interior, the MUP, of the Republika Srpska Krajina, Exhibit P2667, in which he wrote, and I again quote, "We are now entering the decisive phase of the fight to achieve the common goals of all the Serbian lands, more determined and prepared than ever before." A year later, Matic wrote a similar telegram to Stanišić, Exhibit P995, regarding the joint efforts for the, and I quote again, the creation of a unified Serbian state. The Chamber has already made findings on the various counts of the indictment under the standard of review for Rule 98 bis. As indicated earlier, there is evidence that many crimes were committed throughout the indictment period by Serb forces. These crimes were aimed at permanent removal of non-Serbs in regions of the SAO Krajina, SAO SBWS, and Bosnia and Herzegovina, and took place within the context of a widespread and systematic attack against the Croat, Bosnian Croat, Bosnian Muslim, and other non-Serb populations. Further, the Chamber considered the evidence of expert witnesses Radic and Tabo in relation to large population shifts within these regions from 1991 onwards. According to expert Anna Maria Radic, in 1991 alone, approximately 220,000 Croats had been moved from Croatian territories. Witness Eva Tabo gave testimony on the population shifts occurring in the Republika Srpska and the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. For example, she indicated that the Muslim population in the Republika Srpska municipalities of Bijeljina, Bosanski Samac, Zvornik, Doboj, and Sanski Most decreased from 81,693 in 1991 to 2,038 in 1997, indicating a decrease in the Muslim population of 95.3%. At the same time, the number of Serbs in these municipalities increased substantially. The Chamber considers that all of the evidence sufficiently supports a conclusion that there was a common criminal plan or purpose to permanently remove the Muslims and Croats and other non-Serbs from areas in Croatia and Bosnia-Herzegovina through the commission of murder, deportation, forcible transfer, and persecution. The Chamber will now turn to the participation of Simatović in the implementation of that criminal objective. In relation to the SAO Krajina, the Chamber heard evidence about the setting up of a special operations unit of the Serbian DB in 1991. The prosecution led evidence that in March 1991, Slobodan Milosevic, and I quote, ordered the mobilization of reserve police forces, end of quote, and that preparations were ongoing to create new police forces that were able to defend, and I quote again, the interests of the Serbian people outside Serbia. I refer to Exhibit P975. The Chamber has examined this evidence in the context of other evidence led by the prosecution. On the 4th of May 1991, a special operations unit of the Serbian DB was set up, which appears to have had this very purpose. The Chamber refers here to Exhibit P61, where the accused Simatović, celebrating the unit's anniversary in the presence of alleged JCE members Slobodan Milosevic, the accused Stanišić, and others, gives a speech describing the unit's purpose and mode of operations. Simatović described how the unit worked in complete secrecy and was tasked, and I quote, to protect national security in circumstances where the existence of the Serbian people was directly jeopardized throughout its entire ethnic area. End of quote. Simatović stated that from the 12th of October 1991, the Special Operations Unit, and I quote again, provided important support in the liberation of all areas of the Republic of Serbia Krajina. The Chamber notes that this included the Kostajnica area. Simatović further recalled how, under the auspices of this Special Operations Unit, 26 training camps were set up in 1991 to train, I quote again, special police units of the VRS and the SAO Krajina. The first of these training camps, which the accused Simatović enumerates in his speech, was set up in Golubic. The Chamber heard evidence that many men would eventually be trained at Golubic. In general, between 100 and 300 trainees were present at the Golubic camp at any one time, and between 3,000 and 5,000 men passed through there in total. See Exhibit P1000. The prosecution led evidence that this training camp was funded by the Serbian DB and that the accused Stanišić and Simatović, in their capacity as Serbian DB officials, ensured training camps would receive the necessary material and financial means. I refer here to Exhibit P 978. Evidence was also led that, as of mid-1991, special police units under Mila Martic's command, known as Martic's Police or Militia Krajina, started receiving military training, uniforms and equipment at the Golubic training camp. This includes Exhibit P998. In relation to the Golubic camp, one witness gave evidence that Mila Martic had told him that Simatović, who was often referred to as Frankie, would take care of everything: money, clothes, vehicles, etc. And he specified that Simatović took care of paying the salaries for everyone involved with Golubic. The text I just pronounced were two quotes of this evidence. Other witnesses also testified that Mila Martic answered directly to the accused, Stanišić. The chamber heard evidence that in August 1991, a select group known as the Original 28, who had trained at Golubic, was told by Simatović that they would be an anti-terrorist platoon who would serve as, and I quote, protectors of Serbia, by acting as trainers in camps and engaging in anti-terrorist operations. See Exhibits P998 and P1000. Evidence was also led that this unit was later placed under the direct command of Stanišić and Simatović, and that some of its first members were Živojin Ivanović, Raja Bozović, Dragoljub Filipović, Riki Subotić, Olović, and Zoran Rajic. Evidence was also presented indicating that these original members of the unit would later train many others and take up leading roles in various units which feature in the evidence under different names such as the Kninjas, the Red Berets, the JATD, and the JSO. At this stage of the proceedings, the evidence supports a conclusion that the Special Operations Unit originally started out under the name Frankie's Men and later became known as Red Berets or JATD. I should have read that the evidence supports a conclusion that it started under this name, Frankie's Men, and later became known as the Red Berets or the JATD. My emphasis was wrong. Either late 1995 or early 1996, the unit continued under the name JSO, which stands for Special Operations Unit. The evidence supports the conclusion that the unit was under the overall command of the accused Simatović, who, in turn, was under the direct supervision of the accused Stanišić. Several witnesses gave evidence supporting the conclusion that the Serbian DB played a substantial role in the events that occurred in the SAO Krajina. They described the existence of two special command structures existing in the SAO Krajina at the time, both headed by Milosevic. In one command structure, Stanišić, as head of the Serbian DB, would command Krajina police units, special DB units and volunteer units. Another line of command would go through the JNA. In relation to the SAO SPWS, the Chamber received evidence that Stanišić and Simatović were already present in this area before the charged crimes occurred, particularly in the area of Vukovar. In this respect, the Chamber refers to the evidence of witness JF32 and JF33. It also heard evidence that in late 1991 and early 1992, the Red Berets, also referred to in this context as JATD, set up troop training camps at Ilok and Tito's Castle in the area of the SAO SPWS. See also P61. The evidence supports the conclusion that the JATD or Red Berets at Ilok and Tito's Castle were under the overall control of Franco Simatović. There is evidence that members of the JATD from Tito's Castle came to Grabovac in May 1992 and took a number of civilians from Grabovac in their van, who then disappeared. The Chamber also heard evidence indicating that key actors who played a role in the crimes committed in the SAO SPWS, such as Radislav Kostic, Ilija Kojic, and Radovan Stojic, answered to Jovica Stanišić. The Chamber already referred to evidence on the involvement of Arkan's men in relation to crimes committed in Dalj and Erdut. It received evidence that, as early as May 1991, Arkan directly answered to Jovica Stanišić. The evidence shows that between 1991 and 1995, a relationship was maintained between Arkan and the Serbian DB. Evidence relating to events in 1995 indicates that there was direct and close coordination between Simatović and Arkan on the deployment of Arkan's men. In relation to Bosnia and Herzegovina, the Chamber received evidence that Red Beret members who were trained at the Ilok and Mount Osran training camps committed some of the crimes charged at Doboj and Bosanski Samac. There is evidence that these Red Beret members answered directly to Franco Simatović, and that Simatović personally briefed them at their training camp in 1992 while wearing a red beret. See the evidence of witness JF47. In relation to crimes committed by the Scorpions in Turnovo in 1995, the prosecution led evidence that the Scorpions unit received ammunition and supplies through the training camp in Ilok, and that members of this unit received their salaries through JCE members. I refer to P2146. Dejan Sliskovic testified that the commander of the Scorpions unit was subordinated to Red Beret member Zoran Rajic, and that Rajic, who one witness described as Simatovic's right hand, ultimately answered to Jovica Stanišić. In this respect, the Chamber also heard evidence of a meeting held in 1995 at the Serbian MUP in Belgrade, at which it was discussed that Arkan's men, the Scorpions and another unit should be sent to assist the VRS in Trnovo in June 1995. It appears from the evidence that Arkan's men were indeed sent to assist an operation in June 1995 near the Treskavica-Trnovo front, and that the accused Simatović had personally requested Arkan to do so. The Chamber refers to exhibits P1642 and P1626 and witness evidence in this regard. Lastly, the Chamber received evidence that all three aforementioned units were at the Trnovo front on behalf of the Serbian MUP, and that the operation was headed by someone who ultimately answered to Stanišić. See P1698. One witness testified that after the Trnovo killings had occurred, he saw Franko Simatović at the Scorpions headquarters in Jeletovci. Taking the evidence at its highest, the Chamber concludes that there is sufficient evidence to establish the participation of the accused Simatović in the JCE, which included directing and organizing the financing, training, logistical support, and other substantial assistance or support to special units of the Serbian DB and other Serb forces which were involved in the commission of the crimes charged. As mentioned earlier, these included the Militia Krajina, police units commanded by Milan Martic, the Scorpions, Arkan's men, as well as the Red Berets, also referred to at different times as Frankie's men, the JATD, and the JSO. The evidence supports a conclusion that Simatović closely coordinated with the accused Stanišić on these matters. The Chamber concludes that Simatovic's participation in the JCE amounted to a significant contribution to the crimes charged in counts 1 through 5. The Chamber further concludes that the evidence sufficiently establishes that the accused Simatović intended the commission of these crimes. In conclusion, the Chamber considers that the accused Simatović has a case to answer on all counts of the indictment. The motion for acquittal is therefore denied. This concludes the Chamber's decision on Simatovic's defense's oral motion for acquittal pursuant to Rule 98 bis. Just assuming that there are no other procedural issues which need to be urgently raised, the Chamber will adjourn. We will resume on Tuesday, the 14th of June, the courtroom to be announced when the pre-defense conference will take place. As matters stand now. We stand adjourned.
All rise. Voivola Bey.